Greetings, everyone. I'm Mar. Once again, this is my opinion. As you can tell from the title up there, it is once again time for another movie review. This time, it's the 1959 crime mystery thriller starring Vincent Price amongst a semi-large cast. It is The Bat, a remake of the 1926 silent film of the same name. It is another adaptation of Mary Roberts Rinehart's 1908 book, The Circular Staircase, which before that film there was a play, which is where this one gets a lot of its direction and story from. And if you look at the film as an adaptation of a play, which was an adaptation of a book, a lot of the creative choices when it comes to camera angles and how the film is paced make a lot more sense. It's just like when you're watching the Lugosi Dracula film, it kind of comes across. Before I get too far into the review, just a reminder, if you want to support the channel, both the Patreon and PayPal links are down below. If you want to do one-off support, go to PayPal route. If you want to do continuous support and gain access to future videos early and be able to suggest a future topic, go the Patreon route. Either way, your support is appreciated. The Bat. Now, ages and ages ago, I forget when exactly he did it, James Rolfe reviewed the 1926 original. And since it'd been a while, I actually forgot what year that one came out. So when I came across this on Amazon, I thought I was watching that one. But it was when I first saw the title character, I'm like, oh yeah, this is a different one. Did quick research and found out, oh, this is a remake. Now, eventually I do plan on reviewing the original one and possibly doing a video, essay style video with it. I don't know, for the review or for another thing. Because even if you've never heard of the 1926 original, it has its place in history because of its influence on a pop culture icon I think a lot of you have heard of, Batman. You don't believe me? Look at the stuff that's in that film. How he's designed, even down to using a bat-like signal to announce to his victims he's going to kill them. Yeah, and from what I heard, it was even acknowledged by a certain person at DC Comics who'd like to take credit for other people's work and not share the credit with the creation of Batman, that this was an influence on it. Which is kind of fitting, considering that his arch nemesis, the Clown Prince of Crime, was influenced by another silent film cinematic icon, a certain person who laughs. Of course, I don't want to get too far off it. We all know that there was other influences for Batman, like Zorro, but if you take a little bit of elements from the 1926 film thrown in a blender with Zorro, we get Batman, or at least the original incarnations of Batman. But you see why it'd be good for a video for another day. Now, since I brought up his appearance, the way the Bat looks in this film is not as iconic. In fact, it's rather generic. I mean, he's got claws on his fingers, he's got a very black mask and a hat. It fits the time period, though, but it's very, very generic. Now, watching this film on Amazon, the quality, despite it being crystal clear picture-wise, it definitely felt like an inferior transfer, and I was wondering, like, why the hell would this be on here? And doing more research, I found out why. This film is in the public domain, and like a lot of other films, especially from this time period, they end up in the public domain either right away because they forget to trademark it correctly, like what happened with Night of the Living Dead, or they trademark it for a while, it lapses and nobody renews it, and thus it falls into public domain, and people prostitute the crap out of it by making transfers of it, sometimes from inferior, you get that 4th, 5th generation problem. If you want to know what I mean, even though it's for VHS and not really for film, go and watch James Rolfe's video about how a certain scene starts to look after multiple transfers attempts. And to add on to that, this was the colorized version. That was the other thing I noticed when I was watching, was like the color palette in this seems weird. Either they did this intentionally or this was colorized. And it turned out it was colorized. My first hint there was when I googled this film on YouTube to see if somebody uploaded it. It was the black and white version. And I'm going to say now, part of me wishes I had turned this one off and watched that, because in color it also doesn't have the same oomph, because I think a lot of this film's menace and power would make a lot more sense watching it in black and white. And the colorized version robs it a little bit. So that probably also doesn't help with my little opinion of the Bat's costume. In black and white, it probably looks a lot better. Now, this was one of those black and white films. It was one of the first ones to be colorized. But unfortunately, the process was still quite primitive, and with a limited color palette, and whole sections of the screen were left black and white, which that combined with the fact that this is a semi-primitive copy of it, that definitely did not help my view of it. But I will say that even with that, the shots do look good. It's just, in color, it doesn't work as well. Now, as you can already guess from me talking about it, this film is a whodunit thriller, because the main thing we're trying to figure out is who is the Bat, and we do find out in the end. Now, it is convoluted, and there's a lot of characters. We get a mystery author, Cornelia Van Gorder, who is played by Agnes Moorehead. I got in my notes, the main thing I know her from is she played Kane's mother in Citizen Kane, but she had a big career after that, and before that. And I didn't put it in the notes, but I guess the next big thing after this that TV fans will know her from is playing a mother on a certain comedy involving magic. I'm going to let you guys to fill in the notes there. Now, she's a famous murder mystery writer. She rents a summer home in a small town, and it's from the local bank president named John Fleming. Now, Fleming is only in the plot for a little bit, but it's his house and what he did that really spurns it along, and we're about to go into MacGuffin territory here. Now, he's on a hunting trip with his physician, Dr. Malcolm Wells, who is played by Vincent Price, and Fleming confesses that he stole over $1 million in negotiable securities from his bank. Being the bank president, it's a little easy to do that. Now, he offers to split the money with Wells in return for helping him fake his own death. And, of course, the first question is, how are you going to fake your death? Well, we're going to use another body. Now, Wells at first doesn't want to do it, and Fleming is like, all right, we're going to have a body one way or another. Then a fire happens outside, and Wells takes the time to shoot Fleming. Now, this thing serves two purposes. One, it shows that the character of Wells does believe in self-defense, even though he does cover it up a little bit. But two, it makes us question everything the good doctor does after this. I'm going to spoil it right away. He does not turn out to be the murderer. I'm not going to spoil who the murderer is. I'm just going to tell you it's not Wells. But I'm going to say the way this scene sets it up, it keeps you thinking that he might be the murderer all throughout. I had a feeling about halfway through he wasn't going to be the murderer, but I do like that they make you think it is, which goes with the whole thing of the whodunit genre. Who's it going to turn out to be? So in that regard, you could say that they set up Vincent Price as a red herring. And that's the other reason that that you question him, because it's Vincent Price. Even by this point in his career, he was typecast in these type of films, but beautifully so when he did embrace it. Now, as this is going on, the town is terrorized by a mysterious murderer known as a Bat, who's said to be a man with no face who murders women at night by ripping out their throats with steel claws. Now, we get a view of him for the first time when he puts his hand through a window and then it's quickly closed. Now, he keeps trying to get into the summer home that Cornelia is renting. And the first thing they're trying to figure out is why he's going in there. The detectives are trying to figure out, while they're trying to figure out who he is, they're setting up sting operations to prevent him from coming in. Now, eventually we find out the Bat is trying to find those securities, because Fleming, they do not know where he hid it. I think it's pretty obvious. They eventually discover it. I mean, the guy's dead, and you're going to have to look over all the notes and all the history of the paperwork in the bank when you replace it. So someone's eventually going to notice that those bearer bonds are missing, and they're going to figure embezzlement. Hence the reason he's going to have to fake his death. Now, of course, we've got to figure out who the Bat is. We've got to find the bearer bonds. It's a big old mystery tied within. You kind of guess nobody starts trusting people afterwards. And it all does wrap up nice and tight in the end when we find out who it is. It's one of those ones that when you find out who it is, it's like, really? He was the one that did it? It's a little weird, but I guess if he found out about the money, I guess it makes sense that he would want to try to get it. Like I said, I'm not going to spoil who it is. Let's just say I was a little surprised by it, but in a way like, really? That's him? Oh, well, if that's how it was in the story, I guess it works. It probably comes across a lot better if you watch the film in black and white. Even then, this apparently was one of those films that at the time it was released, people didn't like it as much. This is what Turner Classic Movies had to say on it. In an era of films featuring rampaging aliens and sinister ghouls, the Bat's period piece approach was not a crowd pleaser, although his reputation has improved over time. I could see that, especially amongst those who love the mystery films, and that is a thing that sometimes you release a film at the wrong time and it doesn't catch its audience till later. Like John Carpenter's The Thing is the prime example of that. But that, of course, is because you release it back to back with E.T., so something's going to get lost in the shuffle. Waterworld definitely found its audience years later. There's a lot of other films like that. And this is what AllMovie had to say about it. This kind of sums up a little bit of my impressions by it. While it's all done in a by-the-numbers manner, there's more than enough here to entertain whodunit fans. And that's the thing about this film. It doesn't really stand out. I mean, I haven't watched a lot of mystery films, but I know enough about the genre and a little bit of its tropes to note that it definitely feels by the book, and nothing really stands out about it. Which, keep that in mind, because I'm about to tie that back into something apparently Vincent Price said near the end of his life about this film. This was in a 1987 interview on Sinister Image. He revealed that the stage version had terrified him as a child, and the main reason he accepted a film role here is because he thought the filmmakers would revive it and bring it up to date. But he was disappointed with the final result because it wasn't a good script, and probably because it was by the numbers and they barely changed anything. And that's why I said it feels just like a stage version that's been staged on film and filmed, which is my major complaint with the Lugosi Dracula film. Is like, I mean, it's a film thing, but other than like some shots, of course, in that film, Lugosi's performance, it feels a little lifeless film-wise. That one, of course, gets a slight pass considering it's still the early days of film, especially since it's the early days of talkie cinema. Here, you don't really get that as much. Not a good excuse for it. And Wikipedia doesn't really have a budget listed for the film, but let me check IMDb real quick just to double check on that, because I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't have a super large budget to make this film with, as it doesn't really look like it has a big budget. I mean, the biggest amount of money spent is on the sets of the location for the house. And it doesn't pop up, but Vincent Price's performance and some of the other acting performances do kind of compensate a little bit for that lifeless thing of it, but it definitely contributes to the by-the-numbers feel of the film. I don't know if I would recommend this other than if you are a big fan of Vincent Price, or if you did enjoy this 26 silent film and you want to see how a live-action version of it from the 50s will come off. But I could say this is definitely one that if they did remake it again, they should definitely update it and try not to make the Bat look goofy. That'd be the other thing about it. And of course, you know, they'd probably try to get mad at me going like, wait a minute, he's dressed up, the killer's dressed up like Batman? They'd probably do something. Now, I didn't list everyone else, but here's some other people that were in the cast. We have Gavin Gordon playing the character of Lieutenant Anderson. I kind of thought he looked a little familiar while watching it, and this is why. He also played Lord Byron in Bride of Frankenstein. It's almost 30 years removed, but you can kind of tell in the face it's still him. Probably in black and white it'd be a bit more obvious. Like I mentioned, we got Agnes Moorehead in there, and then Darla Hood plays the character of Judy. Now this is interesting because this was her final live-action film appearance. She did an animated role after this, and that was it. But she's famous, other than this, for playing the character of Darla in the Our Gang shorts. If you're not familiar with that title, that would be the Little Rascal shorts that they did way back in the day. So I see they named the character after her. Probably a lot more common back in the day with kid characters like that, because the kids probably respond more to their real name than to a fake name, or called a fake name by mistake. Now, there's not really a lot I could find on IMDb and Wikipedia about this film being remade, but apparently RKO bought the rights to remake the film from Mary Pickard, who would help produce the original screen version, which would make sense. You gotta go to somebody who has a little bit of power. And with how RKO was, I wouldn't be surprised that's why it fell into the public domain, because if I remember my timeline right, this is around the end of RKO's big run. I believe this was a little bit after they stopped distributing the Disney films, but don't fully quote me on that. I'd have to look it up because I know it's a big one that they started to distribute themselves. Only other interesting thing in the notes, and this is for people who have watched the film or don't care if I do this little spoiler, is that in the film it's $1 million that's embezzled from the bank. Now, if you were to equate that into 2021 money, that's $9.3 million. So, year removed, probably about 9.5. So he embezzled quite a lot of money. That's enough to live comfortably, at least for him, for the rest of his life. I mean, someone else, yeah. I mean, I could probably live comfortably on just $1 million, but let alone 9.3. I'd be like, all in all, there's not really much else to say about the film. I think the by the numbers manner kind of sums up everything. I mean, the performances are pretty good. The film is competently shot, but it is ruined a little bit by the primitive colorization process. It does make me want to look up Crane Wilbur's other films, at least the ones that I'm not super familiar with. Wilbur is the one that directed the film, and he also was a screenwriter. If that name sounds a little familiar for those of you who watch Vincent Price films, it's because it should be, because a couple years earlier those two collaborated on the movie House of Wax, which that one has a legacy. I'll talk about that one. And this is something I found out. Apparently, Wilbur is related to Tyrone Power. If you don't know who that is, it's the gentleman who played Zorro in the 40s Mark of Zorro film. Outside of the Fairbanks one is the other well-known one from the early days of Hollywood. It's one that I watched a lot. And that one was also colorized at one point, if I remember right. Funny. Wilbur and his family involved with colorization. And get back on topic, if you are a big fan of the crime genre and the mystery murder, you probably will get more enjoyment out of this. If you want to introduce somebody to the crime genre, this would probably be a decent one, but if you're a big fan, you probably have better examples to show them than this. This one is just, if you just want to get them up to speed with the tropes and you don't care if they like the film, don't like the film, just introduce them to the genre. Other than that, there's not really much other reason to watch it other than for historical reasons, especially if you are a fan of Price and you want to compare it to the previous version, or you're just trying to watch through as many films, or you're doing a big old remake-a-thon. I mean, there's other reasons you could throw in there, but there's not really a whole lot of reasons to watch it. Maybe one day down the road I'll give another watch, but I'm more inclined right now to watch the original one than this one. But that's because for me, it's one of those films you watch, you can enjoy, but unless you have a specific reason, you don't feel the need to search it out again. And that's really all I have to say about this film. Until next time, guys.